check.
Oh, yes. Good. Good morning. Welcome to Instead. As a disclaimer, I'm not your regular MC. I'm tasked to be a substitute today for this special event. I believe that a regular pastor will come and will lead this time. But my name is Pastor Jung Park. I'm going to make a quick introduction to our event. As you know, Instead is a storytelling monthly series of storytelling conversation session, and on the fourth of Sunday of every month, this time, in this place, we have a wonderful opportunity to hear wonderful people's stories. Today's speakers are Raymond Lockley and Erin Knight. I'm very excited about this too. So, well, at the end of each storyteller's session, we have a bit time for questions and conversation. So you may ask your questions or tell from your life stories as well. It'll be a more interactive time together. And also, Erin Knight goes first, and then Raymond Lockley will come next. So we want to welcome Erin Knight to be on stage. Did I good job? Did I good job? Okay.
Thank you, Pastor John. So it's good to be here with everyone today, especially since this is Father's Day. I'm excited, nervous, and joyful to be sharing this part of my story with you. I hope that everyone listening knows that no matter how you came to be a part of my family, you're part of my family tree, and each one of you is important to me. I was asked by Pastor Kathy McShane to share my story on this very special day. It's Father's Day. This was not an intentional decision on her part, but coincidental to my story. I'm sharing some chapters of my life that have been unfolding for the past 53 years. The question, curiosity, who are my parents? So I've had this thought in my head and in my heart for many years, my adoption journey, my family tree, and how all the puzzle pieces fit together. Where will I find my pieces? And I've decided that this is the start of actually getting some of the chapters of my life into written form. Today I'm sharing with you the chapters from my book. I've kept them in my heart and in my mind. Some important chapters, 0 to 3 months, a middle chapter of 19 years, and the most recent chapter of 51 to 53. I took this very first picture here outside of Pennsylvania, or in Pennsylvania, in Gettysburg, in the battlefield, just this past March. And I've always loved winter trees and the fact and the thought of family tree. And so this was an image that I really enjoyed taking a photo of. So the working title for my book is basically My Family Tree, How All My Puzzle Pieces Were Found, My Adoption Journey. And this is another photo that I really liked. So I've met many wise women in my life, and one of them once told me that the first gift a parent gives to their child is their name. Most of you know me as Erin Knight. Interestingly, my name at birth was Nicole Marie Minnick, and the name my parents gave me was Erin Mindy Eliason. Most recently, I found out that my name at birth would have been Nicole Marie Rankin. This picture is a picture of my birth mother, Claire. Yeah, if you know me and you know my daughter, wow. So, I was born on December 27th, 1968, to Claire Ann Minnick. Claire was an unwed teenage mother, whose mother, my grandmother, felt the family must give the child, me, up for adoption. So I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and was adopted through the Maryland Children's Aid Society. When I was 0 to 3 months, I was in foster care. That's a picture of me, one of the very few photos that we have of when I was a baby. This is one of my foster parents. And when my parents adopted me, I was 3 months old. And I was adopted by Betty and Jack, and I have an older brother, Jim. And an amazing life, full of love and laughter and good times and bad times. But with everyone that's made choices for me in my life, it's led me to this path of where I am today. And I'm grateful and blessed. So my mom and dad had a wonderful tradition of celebrating my adoption anniversary every year. And this is a picture of me and my dad and my brother Jim on one of those occasions. And every year it was celebration. It was kind of like an unbirthday, but still something to be celebrated. And my parents have always told me I was adopted. It's just a fact. It wasn't anything that really, it just was. And one of the things that my parents received when I was adopted was this series of books, The Adopted Family and The Adopted Family Book 1 and 2. So that was something my parents really used in how to support me and our whole family with the adoption of me. When I was growing up, I always had that, thought, why am I the way I am? Do I look like someone else in this world? Oh my goodness, when I start to date, could I date someone I was related to? So, through the years, searching, wondering, would I find all those puzzle pieces? And one of the things that my dad loved to do was puzzles. And one of the things that we did his very last year visiting us before he passed away in 2019 was to do a puzzle with all the Wacky Pack characters in it. And we have that framed in our living room right now. So that's the puzzle pieces and finding mine. It just kind of made sense. So this is a picture of me and my mom and dad when I was probably junior high. And my parents always told me when I was 18 I could search if I wanted to, and they would help me. When I was 18, I was out of high school. I wasn't ready to search yet. But when I turned 19, I was like, I'm ready. So I asked my mom and dad to write me each a letter about how they felt about me searching. And I have those letters. And I wrote a paper for college at that point of my journey for searching. And in this book that is on the ground here that those present can see, there's a lot of information in that book of my journey. And I found the agency where I was adopted out of, Maryland Children's Aid Society, and connected with some social workers and different people, had conversations and phone calls and letters back and forth. And it literally took 9 months from the day I contacted the agency to the day that I got a phone call saying, hi. I said, hi, this is Erin. She goes, well, this is Claire. And I said, I guess you're my mom. And she said, yes. And so we spoke for hours, and we have this wonderful gift of being able just to talk and talk and talk and talk. And so many of you have heard parts of my story. And so Claire and I talked, and we made the agreement that I would go visit her. And so in 1988, I hopped on a plane from San Francisco to Philadelphia, and then I hopped on a very small plane, about 12-seater, to Hagerstown, Maryland. And everybody on both planes knew where I was going and why I was going there. And so on the small plane from Philadelphia to Hagerstown, there were 12 of us. I sat in the way back because I wanted to get off last. I was so nervous. But when we landed, everyone on the plane said, no, you go first, including the pilot. And so I was like, okay, fine. And I had carried with me bags of photo albums because at that time, nothing was digitized like it is now. So I get off the little plane, I walk towards the airport terminal, which at that time was a mobile home. And it was in total haze, like, here I go. I'm about to meet a woman for the second time in my life. I walk through the door, and it was like silent. I look across the room, and there she is. She has a whole ring of people behind her, and I had a whole ring of people behind me as we walked in. And we smiled, and then the whole room broke out into cheers and claps. We hugged each other, and then we looked at each other and we're like, we gotta get out of here. And so these are photos of the very second time that I met my birth mother, Claire. So that's her and me in the Hagerstown Airport at that time in 1988. And that began an amazing relationship, friendship, adventure for both of us. I found out I had a half-brother, and he is one of my very best friends. He found out about me when he was 17, and it was a surprise, but now, all these years later, a wonderful surprise. He is part of my family. He and my husband get along so well that my husband officiated his wedding. And so family just grew. My tree got bigger. I had more cousins. I had an uncle, my mother's brother, who my Uncle Scott is very special to me. And our relationship still continues. Over the years, Claire came to my college graduation. She came to my older brother Jim's wedding. She came to my sister's wedding. And in 2005, Claire was battling cancer, and Ryan and I had made the journey, Ryan's my husband, to go visit Claire so she could meet him. And while we were there, she passed away. I was able to be with her, and that was just such an amazing gift to be able to be present with the woman who gave me life. And the one thing she was never able to answer for me was who was my biological father. And that was okay with me. I have a dad. My dad is Jack. And he and I had just a great relationship, and love and joy, and so special that when my children were baptized, he stood here where I am now and held the baptismal font. So that's my dad. And I wouldn't say I'm a typical daddy's girl, but I am fortunate to be a unique daughter, to have the best dads in the world. One who chose to be my dad, and one who found out when I was 52 years old that he was my father. To me, my father-daughter relationships are very special. On my 51st birthday, I asked my husband for a DNA kit, because I was to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready. I will continue this journey to find out who was this person who had a relationship with my birth mother. And I know all relationships with adoption are different. Mine is my story. I have friends who are adopted who never want to find their biological parents. I have friends who found their biological parents, and it's been sad. I am very blessed and lucky to have two amazing outcomes. So, 23andMe and Ancestry, thank you. Science is amazing. I was searching for my final missing puzzle piece. Who was I genetically related to? Will he be alive? Will he remember? Will he want to know me? What medical information could he share with me? So many questions. So, December 27th, I took the DNA tests. And around 7 months later, I made some connections. The tree got enormous, so many answers, but no specific answer to who was my biological father. I made a connection with a woman who was a first cousin once removed. We talked on the phone. She said, okay, let's start with where you were born. I was in Baltimore, Maryland, but my family's from Hagerstown. She goes, oh, I have a cousin there, Bob. And I'm like, Bob? Bob Rankin? She goes, yeah. I said, I've known him since I was 19. He was a family friend who worked in our family business. Okay, I called Bob. Hey, Bob. Guess what? We're related. He said, what? I said, yeah, I'm doing some research, and it looks like somehow we're related. And he goes, well, okay, let me help you, because he knew my journey, because he's known me since I was 19. And he's like, well, I'm one of 5 brothers. Let's look at that. And 2 of my younger uncles were very young when I was born, so not them. But he had an older brother, and he goes, could be Ken. We all hung out. Claire was a good friend of ours. The families were all together. Okay. So Bob called Ken and said, hey, Ken, this is Erin. This is her journey. Can she call you? Ken said, absolutely. So I called Ken, left a message on an answering machine. I had to wait some more. Ken called me back. I explained what was going on and that I was curious, and I wasn't asking for anything, except if there was medical information he would be happy to share with me. And he did. He was very open. And then I asked that question, would you be willing to take a DNA test to see if it's you? He's like, absolutely. So we did. Several weeks later, 6 o'clock in the morning, I opened my email, and there were the test results. 99.9% match. Oh my goodness, my question, my puzzle piece was found. So Ken and I talked on the phone several times. I found out I'm now one of 8 children, which is so amazing. I have a younger sister I was adopted with the family. And then I have an older brother, Jim, my younger brother, Matt, and now 4 more brothers. So Ken and I talked, shared information, shared pictures, and then because it was during COVID, wasn't traveling, so we waited. And finally, in March of this year, again, I boarded a plane in San Francisco. This time I flew straight to Baltimore because the airport was so tiny. I didn't want to do that again. I get to Baltimore. I go to my brother Matt's house, hang out for the night. My brother and sister-in-law and I hang out till 3 o'clock in the morning talking with excitement and joy, anxiety, what's going to happen tomorrow when I meet Ken. So that Sunday morning we got up, went to my Uncle Bob's house. Lots of conversations occurred, and then Ken arrived. He pulled up outside the house in his car, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Here I was about to meet someone that I had never met in my life. This is us meeting for the very first time. So many things make sense now. Why do I stand the way I stand? Why do I like whiskey so much? My fascination with winter trees. Ken also enjoys winter trees and how they look. They're so fascinating. So we hung out at my Uncle Bob's house for a few hours. Then the whole family went to lunch. We all talked for hours. We went back to Bob's house. It was 6 o'clock at night. And I was like, so Ken, would you like to visit with me some more? He's like, I would love that. So over that next week, I visited with him several times. And one day we talked from 10 o'clock in the morning to like 6 o'clock at night, did not eat lunch, just looking at photo albums of pictures of his family, learning lots of family history, and enjoying the time together. He showed me where he lived, where my brothers grew up, and we just had an amazing connection. And this is a photo of me, my second brother Bill, my youngest brother Joe, and Joe's son Miles, my youngest nephew. I found out that I knew I was an aunt already with my brother and sister, but I'm a great aunt, and to several great nieces and nephews, and with brothers and cousins galore. My tree just got bigger and bigger. And this is more of my family that day that we all met. So, let's see. So families have many reasons for being created the way they're created. Mine was created because my mom and dad made a choice and wanted more children in their life. And I am so grateful for the choices that they made. It's where I am today. Another part of my life is children. Children are my joy. And we're all puzzles unfolding along the way. And each of us needs someone at some point to just be with us, to understand us, to listen to us. I have a special, unique story that unfolded a way I could have never imagined. Each step I took, I always took a break at an extra moment before I jumped into the next search, finding my next answers, the last piece of my puzzle. Dads are amazing people. I had a special bond with my dad, and I know I am lucky and get to form a bond with my biological dad. Like I said, so many things make sense. That nature versus nurture, amazing. Watching my mom and Claire and I, the first time my mom and dad met Claire, everyone in the room just stood and watched. They were in awe of how it seemed like we were all one big family. So this is a picture of my mom, Betty, me, Claire, my sister Kate, and my dad, Jack, the very first time they met her. Over the years, my mom wrote letters to Claire and Claire to her, and just lucky. And recently, I had an amazing opportunity to sit with one of the most wise women in my life, one of my heart moms, and my mom, and share my story and have conversations about what this was like for me. And I'm blessed and grateful. A couple other photos. This is Claire and my brother Matt and I in 1998. And this is a photo of me and my mom And then me and my mother, Claire. And another picture of Claire and I. And this is a picture of me in my dad's shoes. And then this is a picture of me and my dad at my wedding rehearsal. So, and then I don't know if I showed this one. This is Ken when he was 19. So a couple years before me. And this is me and Ken the day we met. So, looking at the time, I'm doing okay. And so this is a picture in Hagerstown, Maryland, in the winter trees that I also took in March. Because while I was there, they had a winter storm. And I feel this is me in the foreground with my family watching over me. And the decision that those people made for me 54 years ago, that gave me the path that led me to where I am today. I am grateful, I am blessed. Happy Father's Day to my dad. Happy Father's Day to my biological dad. Happy Father's Day to all my brothers. And to most of all, happy Father's Day to my husband. Happy Father's Day, everyone.
What a moving story that she just shared with us. Really relevant to on this Father's Day as well. It really makes me think about the meaning of family as well. I'm sure that you have some questions and your stories as well. And also, I noticed that we have almost 30 people online as well. So Ryan is helping me. If there's any question from online, he will delegate those questions to us as well. And also, if you have any questions that I want to go to you, and I will let you share your questions rather than delegating your question to Erin. So please raise your hand and I will come to you. If you have any questions or comment or from your own life story, and let's talk together.
Do you have any advice for, I have a granddaughter who's adopted, and we have no way of knowing who her parents are. I've just made up this romantic story about them, and to try to fill in blanks with her friends telling her that her mother gave her up because she wasn't loved. And I've told her it was just the opposite.
Yeah.
Gave her up because she loved her so much. But do you have any advice for someone who, that I could pass on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard all sorts of things being an adopted child. I have friends who are adopted. I have friends who are birth parents. And everyone's story is different. Whenever I talk with someone about being adopted, whether it's a child or an adult, I ask them, what do they want to find? Why do they want to find it? Because my journey is mine and like no other. With science these days, you can go that route and do genetic testing. It depends on how old the child is. Was it a closed adoption? Was it an open adoption? Out of the country. So I also have friends who were adopted from orphanages overseas, and there is no way because there is no database. She knows, is your granddaughter, you said. There is somewhere out there that gave her the gift, and and her parents chose to adopt her. There's a lot of emotional and psychological things that go along with it. I think talking about it, talking to other people who are adopted, I'm very open about my story and happy to share with people in a one-on-one relationship that. How old is she?
16.
Yeah. So 16's, as a teenager, I had a hard time, I said some things to my parents that I was like, oh, as a teenager. I was, lots of emotions. So being confident in who she is, and she could try, she could search. You never know through DNA, through the world. There are so many matches now. Every day, or about monthly, I get a notice that there's more DNA connections. So she could try that route, but in my heart and my soul, I figured if I never knew, have a mom and dad that love me, and I was okay with that. So it's a personal journey, but conversations, I think, is a wonderful thing because you can express how you're feeling, and, you know, don't ever give up. There's someone that loves you out there and that wants to be a part of your world. So it's, you know, when I give advice for people, it's more of a one-on-one because the stories are so different. But
Anyone else? It's hard to take a mask. Well, yeah. Go ahead.
Erin, can you talk just a little more about, sort of, you took these breaks that, you know, sort of just stop and think more about it, like, talk a little bit about that, just in sort of, you know, this distance between the time your mother and your dad, right? That the birth mom and dad is really long. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you waited?
Yes. So during that time, I actually had some information where it could potentially have been some other people that were my biological father. And so I searched, and I did 2 other DNA tests with 2 other people, and it was not them. And so that was hard, having that, you know, it wasn't that person. But I wanted to know in the end, but I also, at points, my dad was my dad. I was okay with not ever knowing that genetic connection because I had so much with Claire that part of it also, I don't think I would have ever hurt my dad by searching, but it was just a different relationship as a daughter and as a mother to find that biological maternal connection versus the paternal. So lots of emotions, you know, fear, sadness, anger, you know, was the relationship a positive relationship? Did I really want to know? And so I took that time to take care of myself because it's a big journey. You know, and losing Claire was really hard because she was so young. And I had the gift of getting to know her. So after she passed away, I took a tremendous amount of time to wait to actually search. Because I felt at times my family was complete. You know, I had my mom, my dad, my 2 brothers, my sister. I was good, didn't need more. But after my dad passed away, there was just kind of that nagging curiosity. And with 23andMe and Ancestry, I was like, why not? I have another friend who at the same time, he was searching for his biological mother. And he's about 10 years older than me. And at the same time, he found his birth mother. And at the same time, I was traveling to meet my birth father. He went to meet his birth mother. So we had that amazing connection of finding our birth parent. His journey for his birth father was different than mine. And so took the time to take care of myself.
We are closing to the time of our with Erin. So thank you so much, Erin, for your story. Our second storyteller today is Raymond Lockley. Please come to the stage. Raymond was former pastor and now is active lay leader in this church and my good friend. Raymond, go and share your story. Oh, sorry.
Oh, wow.
It's only 53 years.
All right. That's not going to work, is it? Nope. All right, I'm just going to make it all up. That's a good idea. Thank you.
God has plenty for you.
am from Keds, loudly clambering down red wooden stairs, across yellow linoleum, and out the screen door to crunch in the gravel. From the whirring of the push lawnmower and from the tinny murmuring of Giants fans coming through the little transistor radio on the brick wall of the porch. I am from the savory smells of sauerkraut and bacon on top of the stove and Toll House cookies inside, and from the delightful dustiness of endless shelves of books. I am from the rushing wind on my face as my hand-me-down coaster bike careened down the sidewalk, and from the salty itch on my left hand as sweat accumulated from never taking off my first baseball glove. I am from the warmth of the sun on my face as my father walked me to Sunday school, and the warmth in my stomach afterwards from china cups of church tea with 4 hard cubes of C&H sugar in each. I am from a parade of American men who told grand stories and published books, and who seldom spoke about their time fighting for freedom for all people. And I am from a woman who immigrated from a bombed-out village, knowing only my father and almost no clean words in English, and who seldom spoke, to me at least, about what it was like to grow up in Nazi Germany. I am from Methodists and Quakers and a Lutheran who didn't remember it that way. I am from teachers who usually let me stay in class, and a few generations of pastors who, for unknown reasons, loved me and drew me deeper into the story of the people of God. I am from friends and wives who mostly stood by me when I didn't deserve it, and from church people who were supposed to but did not. Lately, I am from children and grandchildren who brought me indescribable delight and who I miss every day, and from a big, beautiful Chewa family who is letting my story join with theirs. Usually, though, I just say I'm from San Jose. Standing here with you today seems very odd. According to me, I am the least interesting person that you will hear from in this series of conversations. Oh, I may know some of the best stories, and some of them can even be told in church. But I find you all far more interesting, and one of my greatest pleasures in life is getting to know your stories more deeply. And so I'm grateful that you are sharing in this series of conversations. I mean, what does it tell you that Pastor Kathy is the one who convinced me to do this and said that I should come here, and then, a week or two before I came to do this, left? Come on. So what shall we discuss? I have a friend who liked to say that my name should be Eusta because of all the things I used to do. And it's true. I have managed to work at a number of things and have some good stories about all of those. When I was far younger than labor laws or good sense would dictate, I started working on letterpresses in my father's print shop. I hustled the neighborhood to mow lawns and collected recycling, and when our church's custodian got cancer, my father and I did the job for him for a year and made the church keep paying him because he had no disability insurance. When I was 14, I tried to go out for the girls' volleyball team. As you might guess, that is not my only story involving girls and tried to go out. Girls were going out for boys' sports because Title IX had just passed then. And there were girls on the boys' football team and on the boys' wrestling team. And I couldn't think of a reason why I couldn't be on a volleyball team. There was no boys' volleyball team, so I went up for the girls' volleyball team. Seemed only fair. I was a pretty good volleyball player and proved so to the coach. But of course, I wasn't allowed to join the team. But I ended up becoming the junior varsity coach instead. I guess it went well enough because they also let me coach girls basketball and softball while still in high school and after I graduated. So just to make sure you heard that, I was 15 and I was coaching 16, 17, 18-year-old girls. I had no credentials, nothing. That led me to coaching high school volleyball in Nevada and men's varsity basketball at a college, as well as refereeing. I guess I talked my way into a bunch of jobs I was too young for and didn't really know how to do. Cook, switchboard engineer, or switchboard operator, aerospace engineer, IT manager, husband, father, and pastor. When I was 23, I was appointed as a full-time pastor of 2 small United Methodist churches in eastern Nevada. It was my first regular salaried job, paying $10,369 a year, a number I'm clearly not ever going to forget, and I was spectacularly unprepared. On my first weekend, I did a wedding. That was the second Protestant wedding I'd ever been to, the first having been my own. Just a little later, I did my first memorial service, which was the first memorial service I'd ever actually been to all the way through, having not been required to sit through my grandmother's really creepy funeral when I was about 9. And having hardly ever preached before, I started my career having the opportunity to preach on some Sundays 5 times on that day in 5 completely different locations. That is not to say that I was not educated beforehand. I took a bachelor's in religious studies at the University of the Pacific and got the first of my 2 master's degrees from the seminary at Boston University, which is the finest university in the United States. I worked as a youth director in New Hampshire, and I was a pastoral intern at the largest church in New England. I also read voraciously and played many volunteer leadership roles in my home church, the district, the annual conference, and the National United Methodist Church, including being the leader of the conference youth ministry for California and Nevada. But I was 23. I was a long-haired, bearded, sandal-wearing goober from California, pastoring conservative, boot-wearing Nevadans 3 times my age. Believe me, I was unprepared. How I got through that, other than by leveraging a naivete that some found charming, and through the tribulations and the divorce and unemployment that followed, was through prayer. And that leads me to what is probably the only important part of my story, which I'll call my spiritual biography. The first time I spoke in church was, I think, on Palm Sunday when I was 8 years old. It was a very conservative church and very rigid, and everyone sat still and quiet and tried not to move, and clapping? No, you can just leave now. And we had this radical new pastor who, I'm kind of embarrassed to tell you, he liked to have banners in church. And one time, John, make sure you don't tell the bishop, he had a guitar in worship. Hippie. And so he introduced this new thing that we had never heard of called a children's lesson. And he brought all the children up onto the steps, Palm Sunday, and he told us the Palm Sunday story. And we all sat there going, the adults are all looking at us. I think we're in trouble. And he got all the way to the end of the story, and he said, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to say anything? And we were all too terrified to say anything. And I felt bad for the guy. He was trying hard. So finally I raised my hand, and he said, yes, Raymond. I said, I can tell a joke. Do you want to hear a joke? And he looked up in the choir loft at my father and said, knowing your father, I don't think we'd better. He was probably right. So I continued at that church, and with those very rigid, boring experiences. I was baptized on Easter Sunday, 1974. The spot where I knelt and was baptized and was confirmed is still right there at Calvary. I can go visit it anytime I want. It was not a particularly religious experience, though. What I mostly remember is I had to wear a jacket, and I'd never worn a jacket to church before. And my best friend was kneeling next to me, and my pastor at the time, he was from Texas. Okay? Now, folks in Texas, they know how to do baptisms, okay? So I'm kneeling here, and my best friend's kneeling right next to me, and the pastor comes up with these great big hands. He used to be a football player in college in Texas. and took about this much water and just, in the name of the Father, whoosh, and the water is just running down this new jacket, and my best friend is going, and we both got in trouble for that. So, that was the second time I was up front in church. But then I went to the district high school camp, which that year was at Camp Cazadero. And August 14th, 1974, I met this really interesting person. And I think you've read a book that's partly about him. As I was standing in a meadow looking out over a scene that's kind of like out this window here, I felt this light and this warmth come down. And that was the first time that I met Jesus in my life. And so while I had been baptized 4 months before, that was the day I think of myself as having really become a Christian. And my entire life pivoted at that point. Fast forward a little bit beyond that, and I got involved in youth ministry, and in part because I felt this pull, this sense that there was something going on that was important, that was bigger than me, and in part because, girls. And by the way, I can't just let that pass without mentioning that it was right over there a couple months before that I kissed my first girl ever. So thank you, Los Altos United Methodist Church, for hosting the district youth ice cream social. That was good. Anyway, so I become head of the chairperson of the Conference Council on Youth Ministries, and we were doing this every couple of years thing called the National Youth Ministry Organization. Had a big conference at Dillard University and HBCU in New Orleans, which is just a terrible time. August in New Orleans, who thought of that? And so this does not reflect overly well on me at this part of the story. So we were talking about these new programs. We call it the Ethnic Minority Local Church. And we had an initiative. I don't know if any of you were here back in the 70s and remember that. And so our conference took this real seriously. And we were into it. We had all these programs, all these different things. And the South Central jurisdiction kind of dominated that conference, and they kept going, why are we talking about this? This is stupid. Can we move on yet? And finally, somebody said something that wasn't just ignorant, it was just racist. And I just flipped the table off that I was saying, just knocked all the binders and everything off, and stormed off the floor. We were in a gymnasium at Dillard. And I just sat there going, and I heard the voice of God say to me, and who will I send? And who will go for me? And I said, oh, crap. Here I am, Lord. Send me. And that's how I started my journey into doing pastoral ministry. I was ordained by Bishop Kelly in 1986 in Reno. And we can talk about my career in pastoral ministry, which was, humanely short. But the important part to me in my biography is that it changed my perspective on who I am as a servant. When I was ordained as a deacon, we were ordained to serve, not to be in charge, not to lord it over, not to be priests, but to serve. And that notion, and the words that Bishop Kelly said, which I cannot remember to this day, went into my heart, went into my soul, and helped me understand that I think we're all called to do that, but that is who I am. That is a part of me. And that put me on a whole set of journeys and experiences we don't have time to get into. I left the ministry in 1990, but I had that thing in my soul about needing to serve and to follow God's call. And so I spent time in spiritual direction, spending a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, well, if I'm not a pastor, if I'm not doing word, sacrament, and order, then what is my ministry? And I spent a lot of time doing volunteer work and trying different experiences, trying to find that. And I came to understand through work with the Holy Spirit that my ministry was, first of all, not behind me. I was still called to support the elders of the church, the pastors. And second, that I had a pastoral ministry with my family to care for them and help raise the children and to help my wife through that. And then the third thing that was in that ordination was me, that I was called to work on me, to grow myself, to grow my theological understanding, to grow my faith, not just, what's in here, but what's in here. So I volunteer and I support and I do what I can. Every couple of months or so I preach somewhere or other, and I keep doing that work, God willing. And new and strange opportunities keep coming up for me. Many of you know my previous wife. She and I divorced a few years back, and I'm not going to tell her story. It's hers, not mine. But I can say that I struggled with where God's will was in that, because I believe that God's will is operational in all of our lives all the time. And I said, okay, so if we're getting divorced, then I'm sorry, I missed the question, God. What is it you want me to do? And what came to me was, as I prayed about it right here for worship, it kept coming to me, Esther 4:14. Perhaps you have come to your position for just such a time as this. Maybe it wasn't about me, that I had a ministry to support someone who's going through something else. Okay, so I'm supposed to be divorced, and I got that. And then after a few years being in counseling and trying to understand, what do I do with all of that, I started wondering, well, maybe I'm supposed to be remarried. I prayed about that a lot. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. Should I even date, let alone remarry? And then my counselor convinced me to, and I can tell this part of the story for a long time, and Tamita will be really angry because, she's going to be embarrassed at all the nice things I'd have to say about her. She hates that kind of attention. I'm not looking at where she's sitting. But I fell in love with this amazing Christian woman, and I said, God, is this what I'm supposed to do? So I thought, okay, I took those management classes where you have it's called a presumptive close, right? Like you're selling cars, you don't say, would you like to buy this car? You say, which color would you like to take home? So I prayed to God and I said, God, on what day can I propose to Tamita? And as I was praying that, I saw this gigantic rainbow in the sky. And I realized that God was saying to me, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Now, I did not understand why that would turn out to be the case, but okay. Then as I'm driving a little bit more and I go and change clothes and I'm coming to church, I think, okay, that was a rainbow, science, water, light, refraction. Noah, that's not really me. So as I was coming up 280, coming to worship, I prayed some more. I said, God, if this is really the sign, you need to tell me a little bit more. You need to, because I'm a little slow, I'm a little thick-headed. And right as I started up that little uphill part over there by 85, the biggest rainbow I've ever seen in my life. Just like, wah! And came right down in front of me. And I went, oh, okay, I guess it's March 17th. And unless you think that this is just like, oh, that's a sweet story and everything, this was in January, and I wondered, March 17th is oddly specific. It's like, why not now? But okay, if it were up to me, I probably would have done something really cheesy like Valentine's Day. couldn't do it right that day because, it takes time to get a ring and everything. So on Valentine's Day, my beloved mother went into the hospital for the last time. And after about a week there, died. And if I had proposed when I would have proposed, I would forever remember that that's the day that my mother went to go die. God had me wait a month after that, when I had gotten through a little bit of that and gotten all her grandchildren back to their homes and everything. So God has a way of giving us things that we need that we don't understand. I didn't understand why I was called to ministry and then left, except that I found out that I didn't. I couldn't understand why I was in a marriage and then I wasn't. I couldn't understand why I had to wait, and then I did understand. God works in these very strange ways for us, in ways that we cannot always understand at the time. So there's a lot of things in my life. There's rainbows and people and all sorts of things. Beyond all those milestones, part of my spiritual biography is what happens every day. And I have many other regular practices to help keep me focused and to keep me grateful, because to me that's one of the most important things that Christians do, is they spend time being grateful. And so I tithe. There's a pause there. Tithe, not tip. There may be a pledge drive or something going on that you could all help with and say yes to. Just saying. I come to worship, and I don't just show up at worship. I almost always listen to some sort of praise music or gospel music on the way so that I am prepared to encounter God. I'm in the right frame of mind to receive the gift that God will give each of us in worship, if we're open to it. I do quiet prayer at the beginning of my day and spoken grace before each meal, and spoken prayer and Bible study with Tamaida in the evening. Obviously, I don't do much fasting, but I try to follow all of those kinds of spiritual practices. And lastly, it's been said that Methodists agree with Karl Barth that when he said that we should preach with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. And so I pay close attention to the news and to understand where my community needs support and where God might be at work, because both of those are potential calls for me to serve. It's not always clear to me how to bring about God's reign and justice, but I believe we are citizens of two realms, and I understand that we are expected to be busy with God's work. The call to live like a Christian is not a call to appear to be a Christian, a noun, but to do Christian, a verb. My favorite scripture is Deuteronomy 30:19, because it's so simple and so just matter of fact, which really fits my German background. It says, I have set before you this day life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life. That should be obvious. So anyway, that's a bit of my story. I could brag about the 5 children that we have, or the 7 grandchildren thus far, or about seeing one of the greatest baseball games ever at the 1989 playoffs. Thank you, Will Clark. But I don't suppose that's why Pastor Kathy picked me to come up here for this. But to borrow from Marvelous Marv Throneberry in those great light beer commercials in the 1980s, I still don't know why they asked me to do this. Thank you.
Raymond is such a great storyteller. I didn't know how the time passed by here. We are coming to close
No questions.
Time. But I will give you a chance to raise your question and make comment or telling from your life story as well. I want to take a couple of questions, then we will close our time together.
Or maybe everyone should just go for a Father's Day lunch or something.
I have to go first too. Any comment or question?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure you all enjoyed our time here. I want to come to.
I'm grateful that he shares his stories
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
thank
You better consider go back to ministry again.
But this is the ministry.
Oh, this is the ministry. I mean, yeah.
You weren't listening, were you? I'm sorry.
While I was listening to him, I would think about this one. The one theologian that I like, Stanley Howard, he said one time this way: Christian beliefs about God are truly only can be comprehended when we take our part in the story. And our experience, our story, our life and experience are important pieces of God's story. So, to receiving God's presence as well. So simply, we are storied people, and the God who sustained us is a storied God as well. Amen. So we are so blessed to hear wonderful stories from Raymond and Erin here. We're so blessed. I feel my heart is warmed up too. So I'm sure that you have the same feeling like mine. You go in peace and enjoy your Father's Day. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Thank you, John.